You shouldn't have come here. I hate you. I tried to warn you. You should not return.
Thanks for calling Autoerotica, number one in automated phone sex. Please say the name of the person you'd like to speak with. I think you said Brandy.
No.
If this is correct, press 1.
Wrong number. What is in the... Oh, 35. Yeah? Oh, thank God. Jason.
Kevin?
Hey, man. Finally. How you doing? How's it coming? When are you getting out?
Dude, wish I could tell you I was doing good, man, but I'm better, man. I'm getting there every day. They said they was gonna let me out within the hour, man. So, yeah, but what did we do to ourselves, man?
I don't know, man. It's that dark web crap. We thought it was safe. It wasn't safe. We both agreed to click on that. We both agreed to go in there. But why?
I knew there was a reason why we shouldn't have done that. Oh, I can't stop it, Kevin. I keep seeing it, and I just feel so bad. I don't know what to do, but
all I know is that whatever we saw in there, man, we can't unsee that. We can't unsee that. That's gonna stick with me.
Episode 1: The Dark Web Revisited.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to Cyber Distortion Podcast Season 2. We're back. We're excited to get back into this thing. It's been a few months. We've taken a break, but it was much needed. And we're just pumped about some of the topics we're going to bring to you this season, all around the world of cybersecurity. But today we have a really good one that we're both really excited about, and that's to get back into the dark web. Now, you probably recall last season we had an episode on the dark web, and it was more surface level, and we used the analogy of the iceberg and how you can relate the dark web to that. And at the end of that episode, Jason and I actually had a confession that we made. And if you watched it, you know we both confessed that we have never actually been on the dark web. Well, we're here to tell you tonight that is all changed.
Oh, yeah.
And so, Jason, before we get into any of that, I'll let you say your piece about being back.
Yeah, it's great, man. It is great to get started again with Season 2. I'm excited about all of the really great content we have for Season 2. And when we do really have a really solid lineup, I think it's important for Kevin and I to go back and relive some of the things that we tried to put out there last year. And one of those was the dark web. And that's why we wanted to kick this season off with this dark web episode. I hope that you guys find the content rich, because I'm pretty sure most of this is going to blow your mind in some way. Maybe not all of the content will, but you will find some nuggets in there that will blow your mind and your concepts about the dark web, the way you think about it. And that's really what we're trying to do, is give you first-hand knowledge, firsthand from Kevin and I, what the dark web experience is like, and why it might not be what you think it really is. But I would say, Kevin, when you look at it, right? What's your thoughts? Let's just jump right in this thing and let's start exploring it with them. What do you think?
Well, yeah, let's do it. I think the first thing that we need to preface this with is that, if you're ever going to do this, obviously do your own research. We don't want you to just take us at our word. Jason and I have been out there now. We've done quite a bit of research on this now, and I would highly recommend that you do the same. There's lots of videos on the dark web out on YouTube that you can watch. There's articles you can read, but you're not going to find the dark web by just going out to Google and searching and saying, "Take me to the dark web."
That's not how it works.
No,
Nope.
it's not going to happen. This is a different animal. We like to say, this is not your grandma's internet. We mentioned in the episode that you're not going to find it on Google. You're not going to find it on Bing. You're not going to find it on Yahoo. You need specialized tools for this type of browsing the internet. It is a portion of the internet, but this is not the kindest part of the internet. So keep that in mind as you go. We're going to talk a little bit about the specialized software that you're going to need to get to this seedier part of the internet, and why more importantly, right, Jason, why you need that special software.
Yes.
So
why?
Yeah, there's good reasons for that. So pay extra special attention to this part, because this is probably the most critical part of this episode right here, what Jason's about to break down for you. So Jason, why don't you walk them through the steps of what they're going to need if they want to embark on this little journey for themselves after the episode?
Yeah. So let's set the context. In the last season dark web episode that we had, I believe it was episode 4. In that episode, we talked about the concept of the iceberg and the web really being in 3 parts. At the very top, the part that's above the water is the surface web. That's the part that we all operate in on a regular basis. You go to Google and you search for something, you're searching the surface web. It's all publicly accessible things, right?
Yeah.
The layer underneath that's not always all publicly accessible. You have to log in with credentials to get into it. That's the deep web. So those are any website you have that requires you to log in with your credentials to, like a web portal or an application to do banking or whatever those types of things are.
And that particular portion makes up most of the internet, right?
Yeah, makes up most of the internet. And then the very last portion of that is the deep part to that, and that's where the deep dark part is, the dark web, and it's well under that deep web layer, and that's where some of these other types of activities go on. And I say other because I don't want to expose to you everything just yet, but there is a broad, even I would tell you, a broader range than most people realize is happening in that deep dark web. Now, the context, I'll give you a context to that, right? That when you look at it, really only 4% of the sites we really go to today are really up in that surface web area.
Tiny piece of the internet,
right?
Tiny.
4%.
Yeah.
That leaves 96% of available sites that you could go to are below the surface layer, right? They're things that we're logging into or things that are really deep in that dark web part. And so really that makes up to, somewhere around 400 to 500 times larger of more sites than is available on the surface web layer. Okay, so that's the size and scope of what we're really talking about. Now all of that is dark web, but a lot of that is dark web. Now, so that being said, what that really tells us is there's a lot to explore, right? There's a lot out there that is that we're capable of getting to. And you don't want to just go out there, and even if you have a way of getting there, you don't want to just go out there unprepared. So, you want to make sure you plan before you go out there.
Yeah.
And the reason for this is the dark web is all about anonymity. It's all about accessing items, sites, but I use the word items because there's more than just websites available on the dark web. There's anonymity over emails, right? So I could have an email an email account that goes through an email service that exists in the dark web that is designed to not allow any of the recipients of those emails to be able to track me personally, right? So there are other items available on the dark web that you can use other than just websites, but the dark web is really designed for you to be able to access these things without being tracked and traced. But you don't just go out there and all of a sudden don't get tracked and traced, right? You have to take steps.
So how does that work?
Yeah. So the first thing I will tell you is you want, if I'm going to do this, and again, this is from a cybersecurity standpoint, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to make sure I have a system, a burner system, a system that I am going to use that has no trace of my personal information on it. Nothing on there that if it was to be compromised, I would be compromising myself or I would be compromising that system. That's the first thing. So keep that in mind. The second part.
So wait, to interject a question. So you would recommend that we don't do this from our personal laptop, maybe with our banking credentials cached in the browser or anything like that, right? Okay, I just want to make sure.
No, that would be a big no. Okay, so the second thing to that is you might be thinking, well, oh my gosh, well, I'm going to have to buy a separate computer to do this, right? I'm going to have to get something from somewhere and do it. Well, not exactly. I mean, you could do that, certainly. But what you might want to consider is to also utilize an anonymizing OS system, operating system. And the way you would do this is you purchase a USB drive, and there are anonymizing operating systems that you can install onto a USB drive. A couple of those. One's called Tails, and another one's called Cubes. And these, when you install these systems on a USB drive, you would then plug this USB drive into your PC, your laptop, whatever you're going to use. And when you boot the machine up, you want to boot into that USB drive instead of into your physical hard drive. Yeah, and it'll launch that OS. And now I'm only accessing that OS and the memory on that USB drive, and that's all I'm accessing. All of the rest of my hardware on that machine, other than the CPU, I'm using that, right? But everything else is separate because the OS segmented, doesn't have access to it.
Like a VM.
It's segmented just like a VM.
Okay.
So then now once I've done that, now I have one of these OSs. Now, why is that OS important? Because these OSs are designed to keep your anonymity protected. And how they do that is that they do not trace any activity. They do not store any of your activity that you are performing while you're using that OS. So yes, they're tracking things while you're doing stuff, but as soon as I log off the system and unplug that USB drive and the USB drive has no more power, all of my activity that I performed is gone. Is removed.
Yeah.
No access to it. Right. And so if I wanted to, right, I might want to like save bookmarks or things like that I've been to, so that the next time I use the USB drive, the state of what I was doing is still available. I could do that. And there are mechanisms for that. So you can create a secure key to encrypt your tracking data and store it only on this USB drive. And so it can only be accessible if you have the key. And every time you log in, you have to enter that key or you can't get to it, right? So it's those types of techniques. Okay, so that's the OS stuff. The second thing you want to do is make sure your machine is patched. You do not want to go in there with an unpatched machine. And that's really everyday stuff, right? I mean, If I'm on the surface web, I want to make sure my machine's patched, because there's all kinds of shady things that can happen just on the surface web. So I definitely don't want to go on the dark web with an unpatched system.
If you're going to touch the internet ever in your life, make sure you're running your latest and greatest security patches anyway. That's just best practice. You need to be doing that.
Got to do it. Then what I would suggest is educate yourself a little bit before you go out there. And this is important, because as we found, once you get out into the dark web, you don't really know it's the dark web, really. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that says, you're in the dark web. Now what?
I'm here. Yeah. I got a browser, but what?
Yeah. And you can access surface websites using the same tools that you use to access dark web sites.
Yeah.
So
Facebook and all those.
Yeah. So you really don't know the differences just getting out there. You really have to put some effort into getting on dark web sites or dark web items or entities. You really have to put some effort into it. So educating yourself would help you in knowing how to do that. You can do that on YouTube videos. There's Udemy classes that will tell you about the dark web, so there's a lot of things like that you can do to educate yourself on that. So, and it's also important, because you don't want to get on the dark web and start clicking into things, because there is a fine line. And the fine line is, if you get into some shady activity, you're free to browse it. You can browse all of it all day long. But as soon as you commit to something, as soon as you click into seeing more, or you pay to get something off the dark web, as soon as you participate in those shady activities, there is a transaction of some type occurring. Now you're in illegal territory.
Yeah.
And so you want to make sure you are making the right choices. And again, we say illegal territory. You might say, well, it's a dark web, and if all of my stuff is anonymous, then how can they catch me? Well, even though it's anonymous, it's very hard for them to catch you, but they can catch you. So just pay attention to what you're doing there. The next one is really the next starting step, is in two parts. One, you cannot get onto the dark web without using the Tor browser. Now, the Tor browsers, like the Chrome browser or the Edge browser, this browser is a special browser that allows you to connect to nodes, servers on the Onion network, which is what operates the dark web. And so the dark web is a series of these servers that, when you send your request in to a site on the dark web, it is anonymizing you by taking you on a route to multiple different locations and changing your identity as you go through there. And so I'm saying changing your identity just to dumb it down for everybody and keep it clean, right? But it's really removing any trace of your identity from the starting point that you came from to where you're going to end up at. And so there's really no way for someone to know who is actually trying to access this without taking some extra efforts to get in the middle of that transaction and get information on both ends. And so that's why it's hard, right? It can be done, but it's hard. But you can't do it without the Tor browser. Now, the Tor browser is a browser, so it can also access stuff on the surface web. It can also access stuff in the deep web, but it is designed to access those sites on the dark web as well.
Those special sites that end in a .onion extension, correct?
Correct. Yeah. And then the other piece that is extremely important for that I believe is extremely important, because it removes traceability, especially from your starting point where you exist today, your machine exists today, to the first node that you go to on the Onion network. And that is connecting over a VPN, virtual private network. And by doing that, you are obscuring your current location that you're getting onto the internet with by doing it through a third party encrypted, obscured connection, and from that connecting into that first node. So it just adds another layer of a lot of complexity into your ability for someone to track you or trace you or identify your starting point.
Well,
So
actually, it adds that second layer of encryption to your connection, both when you're in the Tor network too, because when you're in the Tor network, you're encrypted and you're running across the layered servers on their peer-to-peer network. But it adds a second layer of encryption on top of their encryption. Now, that's only when you're in their network. When you're outside their network, it just gives you that point-to-point encryption, right?
Right. Yep, definitely. So the final piece I'm going to say on this, and then we're going to start to get deep into this, is I would say that most of the thinking that the general public has about the dark web is incorrect and inaccurate. And it is that because obviously all the negative stuff is the things that rise to the top when you think about the dark web. Even some of the nomenclature, dark usually is synonymous with evil or bad, right? So people immediately go there when they think of the dark web. But actually, I would say, and I think we're going to find out as we talk through this more, is that that's really not the intent, and it never really was the intent of the dark web.
Yeah.
And if you were to break it down by percentages, just from my observation, I don't know about you, Kevin, but my observation was there is actually more decent, good, valid items and sites and things that you can do on the dark web than there actually is the negative stuff. And that being said, you really have to work at going after the negative stuff. I mean, you have to consciously be saying, oh, I want to go find some shady stuff and go look for it. Right?
Yeah.
You don't just fall into it. So I want to make sure people understood that. It's not something you just go on and all of a sudden all this bad stuff happens. You really have to know what you're doing, and you have to look for those things. But once you know what you're doing, you look for those things, you can find it pretty easily, and it's everywhere.
Right. You mentioned the peer-to-peer network. The Tor network is it's basically a bunch of servers that make up the backbone of this dark web uh, infrastructure, really. And as Jason said, you want to encrypt that tunnel from where you're connecting to the internet, whether it be your ISP or wherever that happens to be. That's why you need the VPN. Encrypt your tunnel to where you first hit the first node of the Onion network. The Onion network is going to use its technology to bounce you around to 3 different peer locations within their network. So you can imagine you might be connecting from Atlanta, Georgia. You connect to the Onion router into their network, and you're going to hit one of their servers might be in Belgium. Then you're going to hit a server that's in Russia. Then you're going to hit a server that's in Germany. And then you're going to exit the Tor network. Now, keep in mind that particular exit point is called an exit node. The exit node is important because once you get to the server that's hosted on the dark web, that exit node was your last known location. So if you think about, well, how does this make me anonymous, and how does it provide that necessary untraceable anonymity? That's how. All the receiving server knows is that the traffic came from that last node you left, which could have been in Germany, could have been in Russia, could have been in Switzerland, could have been in the US, could have been anywhere. But it's not your machine, and it's not from your location wherever you connected from. So that's the beauty of anonymity.
And Kevin, I think it's important to say too, right? In a traditional surface web, connection, I'm going from my machine to a surface web site directly. And so when I look up something on Google, I go to Google's server site and that server has a website on it, and it says, okay, here you go. And I get another link, and I click that link, and it takes me to a server with a website on it. It's direct from me to them, right? So, and that's generally, I mean, there could be some complexities in there, but that's generally how that works. When we are talking about the dark web, we're saying there is a minimum of 3 servers in the middle of you and your final destination. A minimum of 3 servers. The first one is your entry server, the entry node that you're going to connect to. So when we say node, we're using that synonymous with a server or connection. It's the entry node, so from your machine to that entry node. It's a second node in the middle, and then there is a third node that is the exit node prior to getting to your site. And so your exit node finishes that transaction. And then on the way back, it follows that same trace all the way back. So all those nodes in the middle are designed to remove any identifying pieces of information that may have happened in that transaction from the moment it left your machine to go to its final location.
That may have marked an IP address associated with your connection to you.
Right.
Your mask. That's the cool part about it. So let's talk really quickly about why the Tor network was created. We touched on this in our first episode. And by the way, if you guys haven't heard the first episode, go check that out. There's a lot of good information that we're not going to dive as deep into in this episode. But let's talk about how it was actually created by the U.S. Naval Academy and what that's all about.
Yeah, I mean, so the basic background of all of this is that the Naval Academy design this network so that the military had a way to communicate in secrecy, and it was a closed network, right? And the network allowed them to communicate with other nodes and share information and secrets without someone being able to figure out who was saying what and where it was coming from and if it was valid or not. And then eventually, obviously, I think what's important to understand here is that where it has evolved to today is the position in which anonymizing yourself allows you to not have your information be used by entities all over the internet. And so an example of that is, when we look at all of the ways traditionally today, everyone is tracked and traced and, have cookies installed. I mean, how many sites do you go to today that have a banner on the bottom of it that says, do you accept cookies? And you have to accept cookies. Well, the whole point of that is so that they can track and trace you.
Yeah, they're going to use that. Believe me, they're going to use that against you.
Yeah,
they're going to market stuff to you. Yeah,
that's right. And so the dark web and the Tor browser and the Onion network and all of those things are really designed for people who don't want to be traced, who don't want third parties to have their information and to send them a bunch of stuff. I mean, when I think about it, I remember when the internet was just starting to go and we started talking about all of the ways that people were collecting information from me. It was scary back then, but somewhere along the lines, we've come to accept that as okay. It's fine for people to collect information from me.
For 90% of the population that's surfing the internet, it's just become the norm. It's not that it's gone anywhere. That's still a major issue.
But
today we're tracked everywhere we go.
But we're not as uptight about it because as we were back then we wouldn't even put our credit cards on a website, right? Because we were so worried about it. Now that's like nothing. They're like, shoot, let me put that out here. And hey, by the way, I'm going to jump on all my social media and I'm also going to throw some stuff out there, right? If you think you're not being tracked there, jump on your Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat next time and look at the ads that you're getting. They're all targeted based on your activity.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. I was having this conversation with my wife the other day. We were searching for something. I forget what the exact product was, but it was a very random product. No, Jason, not a sex toy. It was
What?
it was a household item. I saw where your brain was going with that. Anyway, we it wasn't 10 minutes later. She's scrolling through her Facebook wall, and suddenly the ads that scroll through there, it was almost the identical product we were looking at on a different website, but it's a different brand and it's a different, completely different product, but similar. And so you can't tell me that's not completely all about how they're tracking your activity.
Yeah.
Now there's ways to turn that off, but that's a whole different episode.
It's a whole different thing. But, for me, the epiphany for me is it brought me back to those early years of the internet where I wanted to protect my information. I'm a private person, right? I like to be a private person. But if I had my choice, I would restrict everyone from gaining access to anything that I'm doing on the internet because they don't need it. They don't deserve it. That's my information. If I choose to go somewhere, why do they need to know what sites I clicked on and what I was browsing for products and all these things? I mean, those for me is my personal, my personal information of my habits. I don't want people digging all up in that and profiling me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Who does? Well, all right. Well, we've covered a lot. And we're already close to a half hour into this episode. So all that's good information. I think it's important that you get this part right because you need to protect yourself if you're going to go out here on the dark web. There are some nefarious sites and some malicious places that you could find stumbling yourself into. And we're just trying to lay the groundwork for this is that you need to be cautious. You need to make sure that you're doing this from a machine that's very secure and obviously, if possible, not your personal machine. Surf from a operating system that you can boot from off of a USB drive, and there's good reason for that.
Top 5 dark web statistics and fun facts. The deep web makes up roughly 90% of the World Wide Web. The dark web makes up only a tiny fraction of the total size of the deep web. Tor boasted a whopping 2 million active users in 2022. Most Tor users tend to be highly educated, and only a small fraction of daily users use Tor for malicious purposes. Percentage of dark web users per country. United States, 34.81%. Russia, 11.46%. Germany, 7.16%. The Netherlands, 6.92%. And France, 3.29%. Most common activities engaged in by country. United States, drug trade, fake documents, user data. Russia, exploit kits, data dumps, crypto locker. Germany, buying and selling botnets, credit cards, debit cards, and fake documents. The Netherlands, trading narcotics, counterfeit items, and guns. And France, hitting cyberspace for pornography, stolen goods, and data dumps. And we're back. So, Kevin, we talked about a lot of information on how to get started and some of the basic foundational things you're going to have if you're going to go exploring on the dark web. But as we were saying, not everything's intuitive, right? You don't just get on there and all of a sudden it just works. And we also said that you can't just go into Google and start Googling stuff once you get there. So if you can't do that, right? Well, for one, what happens? What happens if you bring up a Google browser and a Google website to do as a search engine on the Tor browser to look for something? What would happen?
Well, you're going to go to the normal internet.
Yeah,
you're not going to find anything out on the Onion network for sure, though.
Right. So if you really want to get on the Onion network, which is where the dark web lives, what type of browsers could you use not browsers, but search engines could you use? To search things there.
When you first install the Tor browser, one of the things I noticed it came the version I downloaded and installed came with DuckDuckGo, which is a search engine, and and it's designed to work inside the Tor browser. So that's one good option. And DuckDuckGo is kind of like a Google. It's going to feel familiar, but there are more adventurous ways to go if you chose to do that. Um, everybody's heard of Wikipedia. There's a hidden wiki out in the dark web that you can go and you can search your through your DuckDuckGo and just go to the hidden wiki. It's got tons of links and great place to start if you just want to kind of start searching around and see what all's out there. But there's some other search engines too, and I've got some notes here. One very popular one is called Amia, and that's spelled Ahmia. It is a search engine that's compatible with Tor's Onion services. It's also available on the Surface Web, by the way. It works out there as well. But it sees the Onion sites. And as you know, Onion sites are often associated with the illegal activity. They not all of them, but a lot of them. But Amia's pitch to its users is that they're trying to go mainstream by saying, well, we filter Tor, right? So we filter out the unsafe and malicious websites from the actual safer website that may not contain malware and threats. So Amia is a good option. Another one is Haystack, and that's Haystak. They've got over 1.5 billion indexed pages that they boast on the dark web. It's very fast. It protects your identity and privacy like DuckDuckGo would do, and doesn't allow you to be tracked. Your data can't be tracked. They say you can't be compromised. And there's a free version that has ads. You can go premium if you want, which is an ad-free version. But it's one of the best search engines on the dark web. Mm-hmm. Now we get into a few that are a little more sketchy. So some of the not so by the rules search engines, one of them is called Kilos. And as you might imagine based on the name, why was this one designed? To elicit drug transactions. Yes.
Yeah.
That's one of the main activities you would use Kilo for. So while many search engines steer clear of the dark web's seedier elements, Kilo actually embraces them and it goes towards those. So if you're using that browser, it's designed to find those sites that you may want the other browsers to kind of, protect you from. The last one I've got here is called Candle, and it's spelled just like a normal candle. It's a web crawler and dark web search engine for Tor's Onion service website. Candle's index contains over 100,000 pages, including dark web marketplaces and forums. It's popular among cybercriminals and others who purchase illicit goods from dark web marketplaces. So Candle is one that's kind of more on the seedier side of the dark web as well.
So Kevin, as you were stating, one thing that I found when we were out there looking was, you talked about DuckDuckGo. Well, DuckDuckGo in and of itself, like I use DuckDuckGo today on the Surface Web, and it does a great job, and it filters out a lot of garbage for me. It doesn't allow a lot of the tracing and tracking that normal search engines would do. But even using DuckDuckGo, I would almost say there's three pieces to this equation, right? When you're looking, there's your basic websites that you might use. Even though I have the Tor browser, I can go to Google still, right? And I can use that. I can use DuckDuckGo. And I know that even when I use DuckDuckGo, I'm going to have regular Surface Web sites that are going to show up. And I'm going to have some Onion sites show up. Not a lot, right? I can use some of these other search engines that you stated, and I'll have more Onion sites show up, but they're going to be fairly clean. Most of those Onion sites are going to be clean forums that you can have conversations with, or, valid, anonymizing sites that you can participate in. And in a very small percentage is going to be nefarious stuff. And then you'll get into the lower level with, search engines like Candle and Kilo. And your percentage of nefarious stuff goes way through the roof.
Oh yeah, you're asking for problems there.
Yeah, you'll get a listing. I did have one of those. I can't remember which search engine it was, but I had one of them run, and the page came back, and the page, it had to be the majority of the page. Like, if there was 50 items on the like listings on the page with links, 40 of those items were to some porn, child porn, illegal porn of some kind listed all the way down, right? That's what it was. That's what was showing up. And so your percentages start to change because it's all about indexing. What are these search engines indexing and what's their specialty? So you're going to have some that are going to be looking for the really shady things over the clean things, and you have some that are going to be looking at the clean things over the shady things.
Yeah, I mean, it in the end, it's really all it comes down to is indexing. It's just like the surface web being indexed by Google. We only cover about 4% of the internet. Well, that's purposeful. The reason the other sites are masked and the other sites are anonymous is because they don't want to be found by Google. So they're designed by technology to not be allowed to be indexed. So these work just similarly, but in the opposite direction. They're designed to index specific genres or specific niches of the dark web, and that's why there are so many of them.
So we went down this list of safe, questionable, safe and questionable to really questionable, right?
Yeah.
So let's get into, kind of the stigma around the dark web.
Yeah.
And if we look at, I don't know about you, but the reason why we started this whole thing, I think, is because there's always been a stigma around the dark web, and people are scared to go on the dark web because they don't know what's going to happen. And I'll tell you, for good reason. I mean, don't go messing around on the dark web if you don't know what you're doing. That's the bottom line. You shouldn't be doing it if you don't know what you're doing, because you can get in trouble on the surface web. So why would you go messing around on the dark web where there's more things you can get in trouble with, and if you don't know what you're doing? So, but if we kind of go further down that road, the stigma really comes along with a couple of key things that happened in the past, and one of those is the very first e-commerce transaction on the dark web was a drug deal in 1970. And it was a transaction between two MIT, a student at MIT and a student at Stanford.
Yep.
Right. And it was some smart people using some really good technology to do some really illegal, nefarious things. Right. And it worked. So let's do more of it. Right. So this kind of leads to what I was just saying a few minutes ago. If you don't know what you're doing, don't get out there, right? Don't go mess around with it. So the question has to be really, do you do it or do you not? Do you go and look or do you stay away? My recommendation is that you better know what you're getting into. Because if you get out there and you do something thinking like, oh yeah, I'm safe, they'll never be able to find me. Yeah, you're going to get into something that's illegal unknowingly, and then you won't be able to get yourself out of it. The second thing is, many of the sites that you go to have special invites. And in fact, we dabbled a little bit. We went as far as we can go to the line of legality, knowing that we couldn't go any further, and we pushed it to see what was on the other side, just so we can look over the wall.
You're hitting on something really important right there. I want to just interject this too. That's an important point because, we said we're going to go investigate the dark web. We're going to try to push the limit, and we're going to see what's real and what's not, right? Well, there's a little bit of a challenge with that too, because you can only push so far. Because if you push too far down the wrong path, now you're taking a chance that you could get yourself in trouble.
Oh yeah.
Because believe me, in my mind, and this is just me, I, 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 if the U.S. naval academy and the military designed this, they don't design too many things without some sort of a back door. And I'm always nervous using this technology, thinking, oh, well, you're anonymous or you can't be tracked. Well, I probably shouldn't go down this path over here because just what if all that's false, you know?
Yeah.
So you have to
Well,
ask yourself that question too.
I could tell you this. I could tell you this right off the bat, right? We already know that criminals have been caught because of their traffic on the dark web. We know that.
Absolutely, we do.
That's a fact. So you have to assume that there is nonstop surveillance of traffic on the dark web to where they're creating patterns of usage, right? They're looking at what the patterns are and they're identifying common patterns coming through certain nodes from certain locations. And then based on those patterns, they reset their surveillance up so that eventually they could hit both ends of the node, the entry and the exit ends of the node, and start looking at what's happening. And I've read several stories about that where they're able to take the entry and they're able to see traffic on the exit, and they're able to do, based on all their pattern matching and historical references, match the two in the middle and start figuring out where that transaction's coming from and who's sending it and where it's going and what they're doing. So if it's happening, you don't want to be caught in that crossfire just because you think you're safe.
Well, right, yeah, and you know, the truth is, this anonymizing network is going to anonymize you. It's going to make you hard to detect, and to track, and I'm not saying it's going to be easy, and I'm not saying it's going to be one thing that's going to trip you up. For example, if you just use the Tor network, you're probably not going to get caught if you travel down some wrong path. But it's not the singular action; it's the sum of all things. And I think what the important thing that I'm trying to state here is that while I believe this really is the most anonymous and the most discreet way of browsing the internet, regardless, I'm not saying that it couldn't be, imperfect. That's all.
Yeah.
Or that you. The problem is that you're not imperfect. So if you're depending on technology to protect you and cover your ass, and you make a mistake, I'm just saying that it's probably going to come back to haunt you.
But hey, in my opinion, remove the illegal pieces out of this equation. This is amazing technology, and I wish I could use it every day, right? And I could put the effort in to do that, but it takes effort, right? And so I'm not willing to put the effort in to be that anonymous. For me, it's not. It's the work isn't worth the reward for me today. But if there wasn't all this nefarious illegal stuff going on, it would be great, right? If our normal internet was anonymous that way, it would be awesome, in my opinion. So I don't want the stigma to overtake, the stigma of all the negative things that are associated with it to overtake the value of this technology. The technology is really cool.
But there is a stigma.
Yeah, but there is a stigma. That's true. And so let's look at some of the strange things. So you mess up, you could be getting a phone call, random phone calls from people that you wasn't getting before, that all of a sudden they're saying they heard something happening on a forum. They're guessing, they think it's you, right? Because your system, let's just say you're not using an anonymizing OS, you're using your home PC. Some of these places you go can still pull information off your home PC. It's just like any script in any website that you put in there. There could be hidden scripts in a website that is going to pull code or pull information off your PC and send it back to them. That could happen. Doesn't matter if you're anonymous or not, if your transaction was anonymous. If I have now access to pull something off your machine because you just ran code through my website, it's going to pull it off your machine. And it goes back
to the reason why we recommended that you better be up to date on your patch levels. You better be up to date on your security endpoint protection. And if you're not, you could very well stumble on a malicious ransomware virus or something that hit. screwing around out here. So be
Yep.
careful with that.
Yep. Exists. It exists. So, all right. Well, Kevin, I think it's. I think what we should probably do is get a little bit deeper into. Let's not get deeper. Let's just do a review of some of the crazy things that we've saw out on the dark web that are available. And I'd like to. I'll kick it off with a couple of things. Right. I saw things like. I could see sites where I could buy, like, weapons was a good one, right? That's an easy one to find. You can go out there and see weapons. The craziest one I saw is you can buy an anti-tank missile for 10 grand. And they'll send it to they'll email it to you. Hey, guess what? If I was to buy an anti-tank missile, as soon as that damn thing got shipped, I'd have people at my house, right?
Yep.
So probably not something you want to do. Sounds cool, but yeah, you probably want to stay away from that.
Probably want to stay away from the AK-47 page for sure.
Yeah. But credit cards, stolen PayPal accounts, bank accounts with guaranteed dollar values in them. All of that was available. You could see that like nothing. That was like every other. You could just bank accounts, right, in the search engine, and it comes back with a whole list of special offers, 10 credit cards, each with $500 limits, right? Whatever it was.
Well, the weirder ones that I remember seeing were like you could see stuff like wildlife trading, and illegal wildlife trading. So if you wanted to go buy a freaking lion, there were people out there claiming to be breeding lions, and you could buy a lion on the dark web, and I don't know how they'd ship it to you. I have no idea how you get this stuff to you, but you can do it. I mean, they're taking Bitcoin for these types of transactions. You hear about the common stuff, fake college degrees, password databases, and all that stuff. But the really strange one, and the one that I think is kind of fun, I almost wanted to do this one because it's not illegal, but you can buy a dark web mystery box. And the dark web mystery boxes are kind of cool because you don't know what they're going to send you.
Dude, I had not heard about that until after you started getting on the dark web. And then I'm like, what is this mystery box stuff? And then you keep talking about these mystery boxes. Oh, you could get these mystery boxes and you don't know what you're going to get. And it shows up at your door. And the first thought I have in my head is, that's going to be a bomb. Like I want to...
Okay, absolute worst case scenario. First mystery box dead. Boom.
Yeah.
But the funny thing about this is I went down a rabbit hole. I got on YouTube recently and I started looking because that fascinated me, the whole mystery box thing. And I thought, okay, surely there's some dumbass college kids or somebody out there that's got some Bitcoin that's gone out there and said, I'm going to try it. I'm just going to see what gets it, because I sure as heck wouldn't do it, but it intrigues me, right?
Yeah.
Believe it or not, you can go out on YouTube and find hundreds of these videos where people are out there buying the mystery boxes.
On the surface web, you can see this.
Yeah. And you, straight up YouTube, they're doing unboxings of mystery boxes, and they're recording the whole thing, right? So, who knows if somebody's going to take the time to try to make these as fake videos too, but there's channels with hundreds of thousands of followers of people that do this and do it live. They live stream the opening of the box, and I would have to believe that a lot of these are legit. So here's some of the weird things that they were finding in it, right? So this one guy, he's opening the box, and he opens it up, and there's these marionette dolls. They're creepy as hell, dude. They look like something that you'd see on Blair Witch Project. I don't know. They're handmade. They almost look like what do you call it? The dolls you stick the pin in them.
Voodoo doll. Yeah,
but they had the marionette things, and you could control them, and they had this hair made out of God knows what. They were creepy, man. So stuff like that. Hidden symbol type stuff, like a domino but the domino, it's the one that's blank on both sides, and then cryptic stuff like little mechanical handled jackpots that you can crank, and then they'll do the slot machine thing for you, and you're trying to see what's in the actual. Until you hit a jackpot, you can't even open that thing up to see what's in it.
Huh.
Porn, they put porn in there, like in the form of DVDs, just like amateur porn out the wazoo, burned onto DVDs that you could play. Um, Bags of drugs were found in the mystery boxes, or at least bags of white powder. They didn't know for sure what it was.
Yeah.
They were going to test it.
Yeah.
Ziploc baggies full of hair. Nasty. I don't know why
That's
anybody
bad.
would, what you do with it, but
Yeah.
this guy was pretty funny that I was watching because he was opening the boxes. The stuff he was going to keep, he'd put on one side of the table, and the stuff that he was going to throw in the trash, he'd put over on the other side of the table. But needless to say, he had on plastic gloves. He wasn't
Yeah.
going to touch anything with his bare hands.
Put a
Just in
mask
case.
on. Open it up from a distance.
Oh, speaking of the mask, yes, one of the things he opened up was he said he literally threw up on camera because the smell, once he opened this one box, it had a bag in it, and the bag wasn't tied very tight, but you could see there was something bloody in the bag. So he was like, "Oh my God, the smell is so awful." He goes, "I'm not even kidding," and then he just started barfing. And then he came back to the camera and he goes, "Oh God, I'm sorry." Basically, sorry you had to see that. But he opens the bag. And he goes, there's no way I can't open this. I'm gonna piss off so many of my viewers if I don't open it and just see what this is." So he has a GoPro, right? So he's
Yeah.
like shining the GoPro down in the bag so you can see what's in there, and you can see this, whatever this is. It looked like a little organ of some sort. It was an
A
organ.
finger.
Well, no, I don't think it
Yeah.
was human. I hope it wasn't human,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
whatever it was bloody, nasty, and you could
That's
tell it
just.
was some sort of an organ in there. But I can
Yeah. Well,
imagine the smell.
the other thing with this too, I think it's important to state here because I don't think I've went to any site out there that didn't advertise that the only way to do any of these things was by purchasing using Bitcoin.
Or
That's that.
what's the other one? Monero? Is it Monero? The
Yeah,
other?
Monero. Yeah,
Yeah,
Monero. Yeah,
I've seen Monero, but Bitcoin
yeah.
and Monero, they're
But it
two
was
primary.
cryptocurrency. You had to use
Yeah.
cryptocurrency for
Oh yeah.
transactions,
You
right?
you can't
That
whip
was
out your credit card on these
Yeah. You can't
sites.
do anything like this. You got to use something that is harder to trace.
Yeah.
So that is another part to that I saw as well. Um, but that being the case, let's talk about go deeper into here. Like, what about some of this murder for hire and red room stuff? I mean, what's your thoughts on that? I mean, we did some looking into it as far as we could take it
Yeah.
legally,
This
right?
was this
And
was one of the ones we talked about on the last episode that we were both like, "Do you think it's real? Do you think it really exists?" Um, my take on it is that it probably does exist for such a small group of sick individuals that are willing to see it that they don't even publicly put it out there where it's searchable. It's one of
yeah,
those things where they would say, "Here's the crazy long URL to get to it, and you've already paid for this kind of sick stuff in advance." I don't think it's one of those things where you can just go, like, for example, you can type Red Rooms on Hidden Wiki, or you can type Red Rooms on DuckDuckGo, and you're going to get a ton of hits.
and you'll find onion servers hosting a
Yeah,
red room site or site that says it's a red room.
we showed one
But
in our B-roll. Yeah,
yeah. But the problem there is, in order to find out if it's real or not, you
you
have to
have to.
partake in something illegal, right? You
Well,
have to pay Bitcoin to get
yeah,
signed up, to get the link, to see the live stream, right? And that's
yeah,
the line we wasn't going to cross. I mean,
yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't
Oh,
want to see it
absolutely.
anyway. It's not something I want to see anyway. I don't want to participate in it. I think it's just horrible. But but you can't determine if it's real or not, and so we really can't report that it's real or not.
Well, and
Other
by the
than
way,
we could tell you that part is right. The advertising of it is.
yeah, yeah. Well, and by the way, for those that didn't see the first episode, we talked about the Red Rooms. The Red Rooms are basically torture chambers, torture rooms. They call the red rooms because they're typically painted in red, or a lot of people would say, well, the walls are covered in blood or whatever. And there's been videos created to show what a red room would look like. Personally, I don't think it was an actual red room. It was just staged to look like a red room for the purposes of entertainment on the dark web. Probably not real. And in fact, I saw an interview from a former multi-million dollar business owner that ran a shady business on the dark web, who actually challenged someone to find a red room, send him the link to it so he could go check it out, because he didn't believe they existed either, and nobody was able to provide anything legitimate to him. And this went on for years, where he had this ongoing standing running challenge to anybody to send him a valid URL to an actual red room, and they never did.
Yeah.
So I don't believe those are as prevalent as, the dark web mystery people that paint the dark web as just this pit of evil would have you believe they are.
Yeah. Now, I did see other things too, like hacker for hire, and some of those I could say looked somewhat legitimate, only because of the cost, right? How they priced themselves out, and how they kind of positioned their services. It wasn't necessarily to do illegal things, right? It was hacker for hire, right? And you decide how you want to use it.
Yeah.
So those things were available. I did see ransomware code, those types of things that you could purchase. Again, don't know if it was real because I didn't purchase it and wasn't going to purchase it. But I would guess that we know that those things are true. You can do that.
Yeah, and there's stories. There's legitimate stories that have been validated with evidence that there is illegal human trafficking that has taken place on the dark web. That doesn't mean you can go to a human trafficking website and just go buy a human. What I'm saying is that has happened as a result of this anonymity that lives in the dark web. So that kind of stuff has happened. Hitmen have supposedly been hired. That's one that's a little harder to say for sure. But those kind of things are supposedly some of the more evil things that take place out there.
But I think it's important to also state this, right? It's not just websites. It's that when we're saying these things are taking place on the dark web, they could be through emails, they could be through other messaging systems that are going through the Onion network. And, it could be anything within the Onion network that's hiding your identity that is allowing you to communicate.
Yeah, I mean, and let's be real, the primary source of income on the dark web, if you really want to get down to brass tacks, is drugs and and weapons. Those are the two big ones. And those are legitimately being traded out on the dark web. There's dozens of marketplaces now that are out there that began with one major marketplace years ago. The very first one that was the big one, which was the Silk Road. They're out there, in by the dozens, and they all do the same thing that the Silk Road used to do. They'll shut one down one day, it'll pop up somewhere else the next. It's impossible to keep these things shut down, because as quickly as you shut them down, there's a new one that pops up.
The long and winding Silk Road. Ross Ulbricht was the founder. The site ran from 2011 to 2013 before it was shut down by the government. 170,000 bitcoins were seized by the government from Silk Road and Ulbricht's personal accounts. Sentenced to 2 life sentences plus 40 years without parole. He believed he was providing an ultimate good to the world through his marketplace. The rules of Silk Road stated that only goods that do not cause harm to innocent people can be listed. Despite popular belief, the market never sold guns, only drugs. Ulbricht believed he provided power to the people against the government. And today, with all the pop-up marketplaces on the dark web, There is and will always be some variants of the Silk Road. 10 things you can actually purchase on the dark web. Hundreds of thousands of passwords obtained from breaches. Netflix, Uber, Facebook, and bank accounts. Fake passports, college degrees, plastic explosives and weapons, hitmen for hire, and dark web mystery boxes. All right, so as we're coming to a close on this episode, I feel like, Kevin, it'd be good for us to talk a little bit about and give our audience the scope, the breadth of what really makes up the dark web. What does it really look like in size?
Yeah, so I've heard differing stats, anywhere from 50,000 to 100,000 onion sites that exist out there on the Tor network. So, that's a good amount of legitimate, valid websites that actually work. Um, they say that of that amount, though, because of the number that closes and gets shut down, and because of the ones that are nefarious that don't last long, that at any given time there's only about 10,000 active sites at any given time. So I found that pretty interesting. The percentage of those sites that are conducting illegal activity is just south of about 70%. About 68%, they say, are actually, conducting some sort of illegal activity. Now, while there is a lot of dark stuff out there, I'll say this, I still have visited the dark web. I haven't harvested any of my organs. I haven't hired a hitman. I haven't bought a gun. I haven't purchased drugs. I haven't even bought a pair of human skin gloves just to see how those fit. So all those crazy things they say are out there. Some of them are legitimately visible in a dark web marketplace, but many of these mysteries and things that you hear about are actually probably just myths, like the red rooms we talked about. Now, to talk a bit about some valid reasons why this is a good technology and why I feel the dark web is actually needed. If you think about individuals that are wanting to speak their mind and they're just looking to avoid censorship, that's a good reason why somebody would need some avenue like the dark web to get their opinion out there. You think about protesters that want to remain anonymous because they just want to get their voice heard, but they don't want to be punished for it. That's a valid reason. People struggling with addiction, especially famous people struggling with addiction. They can get on here anonymously. They can talk about their depression, their struggles, and what they're battling with. And there's other people out there battling with the same demons, and I can see that as a very positive thing. Whistleblowers, people that want to speak on others' wrongdoings, and they don't want to get, you know, blamed for being the one to rat somebody out. Perfect reason for the dark web. We talked about government and military groups that can use this technology to keep secrets from being discovered. Obviously, a huge part of why the dark web is out there and why it was created. So, pretty much anybody concerned with any type of surveillance, any type of needing to keep some information private or being not being tracked would need the Tor browser or the dark web. It's an invaluable tool for that. Anybody who needs to share a message or has concerns but doesn't want to risk punishment for speaking out. Those are all valid reasons why I think the technology should remain and exist, because there's good reasons to use it as well.
So, one last thing I would say with this is we've talked about all these good reasons. We've talked about the nefarious, sketchy things that occur and could occur, and the legal issues you could find yourself into or stumble into, and how easy it is to get there. I think we also need to state that from a cybersecurity standpoint, a lot of activity that is harvested off of the surface web tends to migrate and get socialized and purchased and sold within the dark web. And that is a common area where organizations are continuing to look to determine if information or content that's personal to someone or your organization has ended up surfacing uh, on the dark web. And the problem with that is that as soon as it does that, we know this as professionals. We know that if there's a compromise anywhere of information, it typically gets sold on the dark web. There are systems that will search the dark web for credentials, will notify Google does it. Google Chrome browser will do that. If you have user ID and passwords that you're using that have found their way on the dark web, they'll notify you and tell you that these are compromised user ID and passwords and you should change them. So they're able to do that because they're searching the dark web for this stuff and they're finding it because that's where it's circulating at. That's where it's being bought and sold, right? So that happens. We know that. And for that reason,
hackers need targets. That's where they go get them.
For that reason, as professionals, we will always be interested in the dark web and how do we do better with that technology? How do we get a handle on it to control it for good and not for evil? And that will be a constant fight on our part. That being said, I think this episode has a lot of content in it, and we could have been here for another 2 hours telling you the deep details of everything that we've gone through on the dark web. It would just be an overwhelming amount of content. What we try to do is give you the highlights, some that you would know, some that you might not know. We try to give you what the experience was like for us. As we said, you don't just fall into some of the nefarious stuff. If you don't, the search engines you use matter. And so if you just use any search engine or basic search engine, you're never really going to find the nefarious stuff. If you use a nefarious, indexing search engine, you're going to find a lot of nefarious stuff. So those things matter. Pay attention to what you're clicking on. If you do go on there, pay attention to your activity. Don't go do it with ignorance. Be purposeful about what you're doing because you could find yourself stepping into some legal landmines unexpectedly. So that being said, I think, I'm glad we did this. I'm glad we crossed over into the dark side a little bit, peeked over the fence, right, to see what was over there, and decided, there's a lot of good there, but we need to continue to do our professional jobs to keep the bad people out and keep our data out of the nefarious places. So.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're going to go out there and research it on your own, just take some of our advice from the very first segment where we talked about setting up your machine properly. And don't go out there underprepared because you will end up picking up something on your machine that you don't want to pick up or you don't want to have to clean.
Yeah. It's an easy way of allowing hackers access to your stuff, right?
Yeah.
So. That being said, we're going to close this episode out, and thank you all for joining us, and hope you got some good information out of this episode, and we will see you on our next one.
See you on the next one. It's good to be back.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. If you enjoyed the podcast today, I'm excited to share with you that you can now listen to us on all of these major streaming platforms. Also, if you learned anything from the conversation today, please share this episode with your friends, family, and colleagues. The more of this knowledge we can share, the more cyber secure we all become. I'd say like, subscribe, and all of that jazz, but hey, you're not morons. You know that. I will leave you with some words of wisdom, though, from the former director of the FBI, Mr. Robert S. Mueller III. He said there are only two types of companies, those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked. You guys be safe, remain diligent, and take care.